Well, thank you all so much for coming. This is TRU Diversity presents a cross-cultural exchange, Diversity in Translation. It's hosted by the TRU Diversity Committee, consisting of me, Cheryl Davis. I'm the VP of TRU. I am a playwright, librettist, lyricist, mild-mannered Midtown Manhattan attorney, and I am delighted to be on this committee along with Janel Scarborough and Scott Sickles, who actually did
Welcome,
not
everyone.
introduce themselves. Scott, say hello.
Hello, all. That's as loquacious as I'm getting at the moment. But thank you all for being here.
We are delighted to have with us today Jamaican award-winning theater maker David Heron, who is presenting the American premiere of McBEE, which is a Caribbean adaptation of Shakespeare's The Scottish Play, in tribute to the late playwright Alwin Bully. It's planned for Caribbean American Heritage Month. So I would like to say a few words about David Heron. He is an award-winning playwright, producer, and actor. His 6 produced plays have been performed on 3 continents, earning him 5 International Theatre Institute Actor Boy Awards, which is the Jamaican equivalent of Broadway's Tony. He's currently working with actor and producer Malik Yoba to bring a revised version of his controversial courtroom drama Against His Will to the New York stage. As an actor, he has appeared off-Broadway, regionally, and internationally. He earned an Odelco Award as Best Supporting Actor in Steve Carter's Pecan at the National Black Theater. As one of a select few Caribbean-born actors regularly performing Shakespeare professionally in the USA, his resume also includes some of the Bard's most famous works. But today, I want to let David speak for himself. Hello, David, and welcome.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Welcome, David.
Thank you, Jay. Thanks for having me. Hey, Scott.
Hey. So tell us, I know I gave you the really quick intro, but tell us a bit more about yourself and how did you come to be here with us today?
Well, I came here, I wound up being with you here today because of Janel. She is my consulting producer on Against His Will with our great mutual colleague and friend Malik Yoba. We've been working on bringing that production to the New York stage for a while now. We've been doing a series of staged readings, starting with the Schomburg, followed by the Apollo, where our wonderful Caribbean sister Camilla Forbes played host for us. And arising out of that, we were then invited to present the play a 3rd time by Lynn Meadow and the incredible crew at the Manhattan Theater Club. So we were down by City Center Stage 2 and did our 3rd performed reading there last November. And some, how do I say this discreetly, Janelle? Some very important eyes and ears joined us that night. And
Yes.
we are hopefully moving forward now. And so I came here today to talk about that and also to talk about McBEE, which is my tribute to my friend and mentor, Alwin Bully, who regrettably transitioned last year after a long illness. So quite a bit going on.
Well, we're sorry to hear about the late playwright, but how did you get involved in McBEE?
Good question. Alwin and I were both living in Jamaica at the time. He was Dominican born, but he was the cultural attaché for UNESCO in Jamaica for many years. And while he was there, he completely immersed himself into the Jamaican cultural and theatrical landscape. And that was when I met him. He formed a theater company with some other producers and Jamaican artists called The Company Limited. And one of the things that they launched, which sadly no longer exists, and I'm hoping that somebody in Jamaica picks it up and does it again, is they would have monthly staged readings of new plays for new playwrights to present their work. They would get a professional director and they would do a staged reading followed by a talkback where new playwrights could get feedback from the audience and the theatrical community to help them shape the work. And two of my plays, the very, very first two plays that I ever wrote and produced or had produced, went through that process. Ecstasy and Intermission, both of which Janel is quite familiar. She's familiar with both. So he really got my career started because, you know, when you're a young hotshot playwright, you think you know everything. And it took those developmental readings, you know, yeah, you know. So it took those developmental readings and seeing the work on stage in front of me. I saw the work that needed to be done, and Alwin was a big guiding hand for me in that. And we just became great friends. And so when he did McBEE, the world premiere of McBEE, I was there on opening night. I enjoyed it thoroughly. I was very impressed with the piece. But Alwin was always tweaking it. This is, by the way, this is over 20 years ago. And he thought that if he had the chance to work on the script some more, he would step away even further from the original Shakespearean Scottish play, in that he always felt that the character of Lady M, who in the Scottish play, spoiler alert for those who don't know the Scottish play, kind of falls apart. He always thought that she was the stronger of the two. And so he has made some interesting adjustments over the years to McBEE. And so this is the first time that his reworked version of the piece will be presented anywhere in the world. And therefore, of course, the first time it'll be presented on American soil. So I'm very excited about
That is wonderful, and we're very excited to hear that.
Thank you.
You mentioned one difference between the Scottish play and McBEE. What other changes did Alwin make to make it more Caribbean?
The language, obviously, as well as some things that, because we're presenting the premiere as a staged reading, there are aspects of it that would be, that we will describe and that we will play with, but in a full production, you would see a lot more costuming that is indigenous to the Caribbean. And the interesting thing that he also did, which I really like, is that he doesn't say where exactly the play is set. It's just set on an unnamed Caribbean island. So there are elements of Jonquenu, which is a Jamaican kind of folkloric tradition, but there are elements of calypso, and there's steel pan going on as much as you have reggae and dancehall. And in his notes, he also said that the ideal casting for this play would be different Caribbean accents, which I have tried to do in the reading. So those who come and see the stage reading production it'll be a feast for the eye and the ear, because not everybody is Jamaican. So, yeah. Which is a big difference, because when he did the play—
David, can you elaborate a little bit about what the process has been like?
Everybody was Jamaican.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was saying that in the original world premiere production that he mounted in Jamaica, that entire cast was Jamaican. And that is not the case this time.
Right. So can you elaborate a little bit about the process, how it's been for you to develop with someone who's no longer here? So, you know, and with the relationship that you had with him, and sort of, you know, I guess spiritually connecting of what his wishes would be for the piece.
Yeah, that's a very good question, Janelle. So prior to his passing, which for me will always be untimely, I will always refer to it as an untimely passing, even though he had been ill for a while. He and I spoke extensively about the script and the changes he was making. And because he was very proud of the work that I was doing as a Shakespearean actor all over the United States, we spoke extensively about the piece and about what he was trying to do, even while he was ailing. And he actually saw, greatly to my surprise and to my joy, he actually sought my advice, because The goal was really that he was hoping to bring the point where he could hand it to me and ask me to present it to some of the Shakespearean producers and theater companies with whom I had worked. But sadly, he passed away before that could happen. So I was working with him a lot on editing, because he was trying very, very hard to adhere to the Scottish play and play homage to that as much as possible. But what I explained to him is that in the American theater, some of the things he was doing that cleaved rather closely to the Scottish play would probably be less effective, because people attending a Caribbean adaptation of the Scottish play would want you to break away from the bard and do your own thing, you know? So I kind of said, no, throw that out. You don't need that. You know, I know you want to be respectful to what Shakespeare did, but take liberties, because nobody wants to see just the Scottish play done with a Caribbean accent. They want you to rip stuff up and redo it in, as we would say, Caribbean style.
Right.
And he would, you know, and so yeah. And now, with the permission of his beautiful wife Anita, his widow Anita, of course I run everything by her. I've taken some liberties. I haven't added anything, but there are certain things that I've cut. And the other thing that we had spoken about, of course, is the plethora of male roles in Shakespeare. And he was very interested in making some of those characters, you know, gender swapping them. And I've taken that a little further. Even in terms of the work he had already done, I've gone a step further and gender swapped some more of the roles with Anita's permission.
So, wow.
Interesting, very interesting. So also, as far as you were talking about the history of Shakespeare, can you talk about the connection and why that is specifically the Caribbean? Shakespeare is actually something that is very much mainstream in the Caribbean, which most people wouldn't realize.
Well, of course, you know, I always tell this interesting story that as a Jamaican Caribbean actor performing Shakespeare throughout the country in many different states, I've had the interesting experience of people coming up to me afterwards, innocently, I'm quite sure, and saying, oh, you were so, you know, you were wonderful. We enjoyed your work. So you Jamaicans know about Shakespeare? Yeah, okay. So for those who don't know, Jamaica was for many hundreds of years a British colony. So our entire academic structure is modeled, was modeled. It is becoming more and more Caribbean now. But for several hundred years, we were raised like good British students in Jamaica. And so I was exposed to Shakespeare at a very, very young age. And I think when I was in high school, the very first Shakespearean play that we covered when I was in 7th grade was the Scottish play. So this is the kind of a full circle moment. But yes, Shakespeare was a big part of my upbringing. And you know, I majored in English and communications when I went to university. And then when I made the decision to come to the United States after being, you know, a successful playwright and producer in Jamaica, and I came here and decided to do more acting than I had done back home, Shakespearean roles were the ones that found me. Because when I came, I emigrated here just around the time of 9/11. I had been in New York just a few months when the planes, and that was the time. I arrived at the right time, because there were a lot of theater companies who did Shakespeare who were opening up their eyes and ears to different accents a little. And I had a much thicker Jamaican accent when I landed. So I was going to all of these auditions for Tennessee Williams and August Wilson, and I was not booking those roles. But the first time I auditioned for Hamlet, I was cast as Laertes. So, you know, over time, I've been very, very pleased to see that I now have theater Shakespearean producers and directors who encourage the island accent and want me to push it even more. In Rhode Island, I twice now I've been there. I played Oberon Theseus in Midsummer just before COVID, and then went back there and did Caliban in The Tempest last year, Shakespeare in the Park, with the amazing Colonial Theater of Rhode Island. Big up to my friend Marian Markham. I hope she's watching. Anyway, on both of those occasions, they were telling me to give them more island, more, especially Caliban. You know, they wanted it as raw as it could be. And I was always saying, boy, if I really give it to them, I don't know if them going to understand what me I say. But they did. They did. And then something very interesting
Them are
happened a
not
few
ready.
years ago.
Them are not ready. Them are not ready.
But then, you know, I knew I was onto something when I did The Winter's Tale with the amazing Stephen Burton of New York Classical Theater. And I was playing Polixenes in The Winter's Tale. And there's a scene when I go to check on my wayward son, and I don't want anybody to recognize that I am King Polixenes. So I needed to come up with an accent. And Stephen Birdman, God bless him, I was doing a kind of a British accent, and he said, what happens if we work with your Jamaican accent? Which I did. And some Scottish audience members came up to me after a performance, and they said, when they do Shakespeare in Scotland, they sound exactly how I sound. Which was stunning to me. They said the bro I had doing my Jamaican accent was very similar to how they speak, how they do Shakespeare in certain parts of Scotland, which was eye-opening for me.
Yes.
Yes, and I always think the Irish brogue sounds very close to the Jamaican accent. They're
right
on the same track.
Because guess what? In my family tree, my great-great-grandfather came to the Caribbean from Scotland.
There you have it.
I found that out a few years ago.
Diversity, true.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But what is it about Shakespeare specifically do you think makes it so adaptable?
Oh, well, I think that the writing is timeless. I just think the writing is timeless. I think it's adaptable because the human emotions that he captured all of those 100 years ago, whether the play was set in Venice or in Milan or in Egypt or in Denmark, they speak to what and who we are today. And even revisiting Alwin's play, McBEE, again, based on the Scottish play, I look at some of those lines where, you know, Macbeth very famously says to his lady, we will go no further in this business. And her response is infirm of purpose, you know. And in Alwyn's play, the line is, we're not going any further in this business. And his wife says, be a man instead of a blasted cow. And that's exactly what Lady Macbeth said to McBEE, Macbeth in the Scottish play. But now it's taken on a Caribbean accent, but the emotion is still the same thing. Man up and do the deed. And I think the timelessness of it is what makes it work, which is why there are wonderful things happening with Shakespeare right now. There is a cinematic version called Romeo and Juliet Forever, which is on screens in Great Britain. It's not a movie. It was a recorded theatrical production, which they're now putting in British theaters, and all the actors are Jamaican and Caribbean. So I think that 400 or 500 years ago, this man had such a wonderful understanding of the human condition that he wrote these masterpieces, and wherever you put them, whatever, you can always find a way to make it more accessible to an audience, which is a wonderful thing. I remember doing Othello at the Shakespeare Festival of Virginia, and they took Othello and set it in post-apartheid South Africa. So Othello was a Zulu warrior, and Desdemona was the daughter of one of the nobles in South Africa, and I played Rodrigo. With the, you know, all of us had South African accents, and there was Zulu drumming and everything, and people were just moved to tears, you know. And it was that was one of the first Shakespearean productions I did that they took outside of a regular Shakespearean context and set it in a modern setting, kept the language, kept all the language, but there you were with Nelson Mandela's image up behind us and performing Shakespeare, and people loved.
That's
David,
beautiful, beautiful.
yes.
Now, David, a lot of your work when you're performing Shakespeare has been outdoors. So as a person from the Caribbean, do you think that that helps you being able to be in the elements? Is that something that?
Yes, especially when I did Oberon in Midsummer Night's Dream and Caliban in The Tempest. Both of those shows I did up in Rhode Island, and being there on the stage under the stars was just literally heaven. An amazing experience. Shakespeare outdoors is always very special. I did Lord Montague in Romeo and Juliet out at the Shakespeare Festival of St. Louis. That's what we call rock star Shakespeare, because there are, on a good night, there are 3,000 people in the park. They don't have big screens. So the people at the back either have their binoculars or they're just there. They can hear everything clearly and they can see us like little Barbie dolls way in the distance, but they're completely immersed in the experience. So I think Shakespeare outdoors is a very, very special thing. And I'm not sure if the public theater were the ones who started it, but if they did, they deserve our endless credit and thanks, because that has now become traditional in so many different states of this great country, and people bask in that experience.
I wanted to ask, as a playwright, and you talked about marketing the McBEE to Shakespeare theaters, and I was wondering, to what extent is it different? To what extent is it overlap when you are marketing a Caribbean play, your own play, to theaters in general that is not a translation, that is not based on pre-existing material or Shakespeare? How is your voice and your stories, are they welcomed in different places, or is it a bigger challenge or just a different challenge?
Okay, that's a very good question, Scott. So this production of McBEE that I am doing is going to be a huge test, because unfortunately, Alwin passed away before I could get the script of McBEE to anyone. I showed it to one producer who didn't get it. I mean, to be quite honest. And I understood why they didn't get it, because that particular version of the script was, first of all, a lot longer than the cut that I am doing. I said it to Alwin's wife that for a staged reading, there were just a lot of things that Alwin had in his the draft that he was working on when he transitioned that I knew in a staged reading I just couldn't do. In a full production, maybe, but you know, Scott, I will always say this. I think that there are some scripts that I've read as an actor that plays that I've actually acted in, where when you read it on the page and when you see it on a stage, it is so vastly different. And the version of McBEE that Alwin left us with is one of those productions that when he transitioned, that piece would probably have worked much better on stage rather than on the page. And so the one theater company that I did get to send the script to before Alwin passed were not interested in it. So with the changes that I have made to make it more reader friendly for a stage reading production, it'll be interesting to see if Anita and his estate believe that version that I have done may be more marketable. So that's a question mark. that we will, you know, that we will, that I will know, I will be able to answer that question in more detail, I think, in a couple of weeks or months' time. But I remember, sorry, Jay, no, I wanted to tell Scott something else, though, but in terms of my own work, one of the things that I have been open to, and you know, some Jamaicans will call me a sellout, I guess, is that I have written Jamaican plays that have passages that are very, very, very heavily Jamaican dialect. And I've always said that I am open, if I'm going into certain markets, to making tweaks to make my work more understandable to people who are not Jamaican, because I am all about communication. And people will say, oh, why are you doing that? Because reggae music is so popular all over the world. When you go to a big reggae show in Japan, those people don't understand any of the lyrics, but they're just relishing the music. And I've said to them, you know, you're dealing with two very different art forms. Because when 100,000 people in Japan are jumping around to Jamaican lyrics they don't understand, it's not the lyrics that they're moving to, it's the beat and the music. But with a theater, and with a theatrical performance, even more so than film where you can have subtitles, you have to engage the ear. And so if I have a play where there's a line that says, me I go over there, which for the Jamaicans, hey, Carleen Largy, which Jamaicans, you know, which Jamaicans know means I am going over there, me I go over there, I don't have a problem changing that line to I going over there. Because an American who's never been to Jamaica understands I going over there means I'm going over there. But I just think that for me, I am willing to find a midpoint to make the play accessible. And Janel will know that with Against His Will, that is exactly what I've done. Because that is a play that brings together within the parameters of the story, Jamaicans from all different social backgrounds, some of whom in the original Jamaican world premiere were characters that spoke in the most raw Jamaican dialect possible. And I said to myself, if this play is ever to get to the pinnacle of the American theater and be seen by as wide an audience as possible, I don't want people sitting down in the audience scratching their head and trying to figure out what did someone say. And how I knew that I was onto something is that I had the great pleasure of working with the magnificent British producer and director Kwame Kweyarma, who was running the Young Vic in England for several years. But prior to that, he was artistic director at Baltimore Center Stage. And I had the joy and honor of working with him on the world premiere of the very first big, full-blown Bob Marley stage musical. And I distinctly remember the first time we performed the play in the rehearsal room from start to finish, no costumes or anything, but the entire play for the staff of Baltimore Center Stage. Once we were singing those Bob Marley songs, they were right there. The script written by Kwame, he was trying to honor our Jamaican culture, was fully patois, fully dialect, as raw as it could be. And so many of those people, as I said, once we were singing, they were great. The minute we got into the dialogue, everybody was doing this. What? And Kwame came to us a couple of days later and he said, guys, and he was, of course, there were several Jamaican actors in the cast. And he said, with all due respect, we have a communication problem. You know, that famous line from Apollo 13, Houston, we have a problem. Kwame was like, cast, we've got a problem. And so we had to find the middle ground. We had to find the middle ground. We did, and that production became the biggest hit in the history of Baltimore Center Stage, certainly at that time. They had never had a play that sold out like that. You could not get the tickets because it was accessible. And none of the Jamaicans who came said we were selling out because they understood we were going for a wider market.
Mm-hmm. But that's a testament to you, though. I believe, David, just in working with you as a consulting producer, is that as a playwright, you are able to have the sort of ear of what will be marketable to the audience, the widest audience. And that's one of your goals as a playwright, is to reach as many people in an exchange of Caribbean culture, but knowing how to make that still authentic and be able to cross those cultures. And I think you are really effective at doing that and having that objectivity.
Thank you so much. Well, Janelle, you know,
So can
the
you tell
play
us
that
from your background in the beginning, as far as like marketing, what that was like? Mhm.
okay. So no, I was just gonna say to you, to follow on to your point, you know, the play that you, so for everybody who doesn't know, Janelle Scarborough is also a brilliant actress, and that's actually how we met. She played my wife. She played my wife very well in,
Ex-wife, ex-wife.
yeah, no, well, we were married in the play, and then anyway,
Yes,
let's
and
not
then you
give it away.
treated me badly.
There you go. There you go. Very bad. But so in the American premiere of my play Love and Marriage in New York City, which was that was the very first play I wrote that had no Jamaican patois at all. No, it was just written 100% in standard English, directed by the great Woody King Jr. at the Billie Holiday Theater, and we eventually went down to the National Black Theater Festival. And that play is actually set, it runs in parallel to the story of Madame Butterfly, the opera, Puccini's opera, because there is one character who is obsessed with that opera. And what happens in that play is that the love stories that are being told in that play run a very close parallel to the Puccini story about women who fall in love with men who treat them badly, which Janelle just told you. And that's my biggest international success to date for exactly that reason. Because whether we were performing at the Peggy Ashcroft Theatre in London or at, in Winston-Salem at the National Black Theatre Festival or in Brooklyn, and no matter if the audience was 90% Caucasian or 90% Jamaican, everybody got it and everybody loved it. And when I told people that I was going to write a Jamaican play that did not have one sentence uttered in Jamaican dialects or patois, no, everybody thought it would work. And then you're putting in opera. You're a Jamaican dude. What are you're putting in Puccini's Madame Butterfly? What are you doing? My mind was always on the international audience. And so it's no secret that that's been the play that's done the best internationally.
Right.
I'm sorry, Jay, you were asking me
No,
something
of
else?
course, of course.
Oh.
But I think you have a very unique perspective because you're a playwright who has been produced in different continents. I mean, Jamaica, United States, Canada, London. Can you talk about the nuances of those audiences and producing in those spaces, the differences and
Well,
maybe the same?
yes. Well, one of the nuances is the practicality of public transport. I remember when we were in England and we were touring the UK, we toured the United Kingdom twice. I remember that some theater owners were very concerned because the play runs, Love and Marriage runs about 2.5 hours with a 15-minute intermission. And they had a concern that the people who take public transportation would miss their trains to go to where they're going because they would get out of the theater late. And of course, I may not be Tony Kushner, but I was not going to cut a play to suit a bus schedule. So they just had to make us start half an hour early. I'm sorry. So that's one of the things that I've come up against where, yeah, that's one of the things I've come up against in terms of scheduling. If a play runs a little bit over what people consider kind of the allocated time. I know that in the United States now, there is an increasing trend where people want the play to just run without any intermission. So that's something that Janelle and I speak about all the time. But one of the things that I think has really helped me is the fact that prior to this life as an artist, I did have a brief corporate career as a marketer. And I worked in an advertising agency, and I also was marketing manager for one of the biggest banks in the world. And so one of the things that I learned at a very young age is to treat different clients, whether it be Pepsi, whether it be Esso, Exxon, whether it be the Jamaica Tourist Board, which are some of the accounts that I worked on when I was in advertising. You have to treat each product differently. If I'm selling Jamaica, as part of the Jamaica Tourist Board, it's different from selling Pepsi-Cola. It's different from selling gasoline. And so each play of mine, I have treated as a different product. And what works in some markets with this play may not work in other markets for a different kind of. You understand what I'm saying? So So I think that's one of the things that I bring to the table. I've actually gone into meetings where my plays were being produced by other people, and they would ask my advice as to how they could market it, because, you know, I'd had the previous experience. And when I have not been asked my opinion, I give it anyway, because because I know. I know.
It's wonderful that because you know from both as a creative and also with your marketing expertise, which is wonderful and inimitable. And it's great that you bring that to the table in addition to your talent.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I hear that it's called thinking with the right and left side of the brain.
Mhm.
So yeah.
No, it's a wonderful thing to work with him for that reason,
Thank you.
because we can jump out, have a really creative conversation, but then we can have a commercial conversation in equal measure, which is just a delight. So yes.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, XY.
Now, with your marketing hat on, in terms of the timing of doing this during Caribbean American Heritage Month, how have you been using that to market the show? And if so, how?
Yes, well, definitely using the fact that the playwright is a Caribbean legend. That's number one. Number two, it is the first. I want audiences to come and be a part of the very first American audience to experience this production on American soil. There will be future productions, and they will probably be full productions where it's the lights and the costumes and everything else. But this production is probably as close as you could get to that without it being that. And I think making it a Caribbean American event on American soil is very special. Thankfully, I also have the sponsorship of my good friends over at Golden Crust. I have to big up Omar Hawthorne and Golden Crust. So we actually have a complimentary Caribbean cuisine reception prior to the show. So people can come in and nibble on some jerk chicken, and they can have a little bit of festival and some cocktail beef patties.
It's some team.
And just kind of, we're just making it a Caribbean night, Cheryl. And I think that kind of sets it apart. The non-Caribbeans, I think, will be intrigued by what the play is and its roots. And the Caribbean audience will also be drawn to the fact that it's a Caribbean piece and that it's being presented as part of an entire Caribbean evening. Miss Pat Chin, the legendary co-founder of the largest reggae record label in the world, VP Records, and who is now a best-selling author thanks to her book, Pat Chin, My Reggae Music Journey. She's going to be there. She's going to be signing autograph and selling autograph copies of her book. Kendall Ginger Teas, another one of our sponsors, are going to be doing free sampling of their amazing range of ginger teas, which are authentically Caribbean as well. So it's going to be a really, really fun night, we think. The marriage of theater and culture, I don't think it gets any better than what we're offering on that night. Besides which, of course, I'm very proud to say I'm working with 11 actors. And all of the playwrights, please, I'm one of you. Just remember, the more actors you have is the harder it is to get produced. Alwin's play probably has 25 characters. So getting it down to 11 and having to double people up was something that I had to do because obviously there's no way. But a majority of these actors are from the Caribbean, which is very exciting. And some of them are doing very well. Luke Forbes is of Jamaican descent. He's playing the lead role of McBEE. He's currently on the Amazon Prime series Harlem. And playing his lady is Denise Hunt, who appeared in the film How Stella Got Her Groove Back opposite Angela Bassett and Taye Diggs. She's playing Lady M. We've got Miranda Melhado, Jamaican actor, who is also currently appearing on Amazon in the film Amityville Vampire. We've got Emilio Evans, who is on All Blacks TV show Makeup and Breakup. So it's a pretty star-studded cast of up-and-comers as well as established players, and most of them of Caribbean descent. We got our African dude, Yinka Ade, who is of Nigerian descent, I believe, in the cast as well. Most importantly, and this is a spoiler alert, but I don't mind sharing it. You know, Shakespeare Shakespeare had three witches, right, who gave the prophecy to McBEE, Macbeth. In Alwin's production, it was three Rastafarians. It is three Rastafarians. Well, one of them is a queen Rasta, because Alwin wrote it as three male Rastas. And I said, no, in my opinion, one of them, and I spoke to his wife about it, I said, there should be a queen Rasta in that group of three, you know, because Shakespeare originally had three female witches. Of course, over the years, that has morphed into all sorts of different kinds of casting. So I like having the fact of a regal Rasta queen as part of the mix, you know, and Diane Dixon plays that role. So, and you know, one of the things there was a question earlier on about the merger between Shakespeare and the Caribbean. One of the things that Alwin has done with these Rastafarians is that he has imbued them with some really, really interesting powers, where even more so than the three witches in the Scottish play, these three Rastas really can shake things up, is all I'm going to say. They have a whole lot of power invested in them that really turns the story on its ear in a very interesting way. I don't want to give away too much, but I wanted to say that.
Understood, understood. So take us back to your humble beginnings. It's wonderful everything you're up to today, but I think it's important to understand those early years where you were balancing playwriting and marketing and producing. And, you know, we have the saying in the Caribbean, you have many jobs when you are of the Caribbean. It's just in us, right? So yes. Tell me about you know, sharpening those irons, and what is it like producing in Jamaica, a young artist? What challenges, what things were easy, that journey?
Right. Okay. Well, I got into writing and producing because my first love was really acting. I did a lot of performing when I was in high school and when I was in university at the University of the West Indies, big up UWI. And then I went corporate. I got a nice cushy job and I was living that life, but the performer in me still wanted to find an outlet. And at that time, Jamaica was in a cycle of what is now affectionately known as roots theater, where the plays that were making money were marketed in a particular way, usually to, I guess, what in Jamaica they would say the inner city, you know? The stories were set there. Many feature films that have come out of Jamaica have been successful, have been set there also. And I was thought of as this little brown-skinned, light-skinned uptown boy. So there weren't a lot of acting roles for me at the time. So I thought, well, if I start writing my own stuff, maybe I could write myself a role and get my feet wet. So the writing was really to open up the acting possibility. Well, the first mistake I made was that the play that I wrote, which is about a light-skinned uptown, upwardly mobile advertising executive who falls in love with a stripper who's from the wrong side of the tracks. The play was called Ecstasy. It landed in the hands of another one of my mentors, Trevor Nair, who didn't see me in that role at all. And he told me, you know, he said, he was very diplomatic. He said, you know, David, when playwrights write their own work, especially new playwrights, you are so invested in that character because you sweated and poured all of your energy into him, that as a director, if I tell you as the actor now to do something different, you're still gonna have this idea in your head, but that's not what I wrote. And when I conceived him, I didn't think that I don't think he would do that. So he said, so let another guy do this. You know, you be the playwright and watch it for your first play. And he was right. He was absolutely right, because without me interfering in his process, he crafted a play that was ginormously successful. And then I wound up, as Janelle alluded to a while ago, with a challenge, because now I was a successful playwright and eventually a producer, and I still had a 9-to-5 job. And I knew that I was going to have to choose one day. I knew that that was going to happen when I started falling asleep in board meetings in front of senior executives from Canada and the Bahamas. And it was so ironic because the job that I had at the time, all of the entire organization was behind me as a playwright. They would buy out complete houses, 200 seats. They would just buy the entire thing out and support. But it was not cool when I started to nod off in board meetings. And so I knew that I was going to have to choose, and this is what I chose. To Janelle's point also, so, you know, balancing the two was difficult, and I knew that if I wanted to give this a shot, I would have to leave corporate behind. And even when I've been broke, I've never regretted it one time. People ask me that question all the time. Do I ever go back, you know, mentally to the days when I had the company car and I was getting a regular paycheck? I've never regretted it, not a single day, because you know what I've discovered is that I'm really not a 9-to-5 person. I know other people on this Zoom who are not either. I don't know how I got up and went to sit at a desk all those years at 9 a.m. It is really not me. But to Janelle's point, I do have a concern now because in Jamaica and in other Caribbean territories, theater is, here in the USA too, producing for theater is becoming much more challenging. It's much more expensive. The audiences are drifting now because they have so many other entertainment options. There are people who would rather play video games and be on TikTok rather than go sit down in a theater for 2 hours. So it's not easy anymore. And I do worry about young producers who want to produce work in Jamaica and elsewhere. First of all, the amount of theaters in Jamaica has dropped dramatically. When I was active there over 20 years ago, on any given weekend in Kingston, which is not a huge city, you would have 6 plays. And we used to all help each other. If you came to my play, my box office would say, I'm so sorry, we're sold out. But if you go up to center stage, you can see Oliver Samuels. Or if you go over to the little theater, the great Basil Dawkins, his play is going on. But now those theaters are down to maybe 1 or 2. So you don't even have the performing spaces anymore. And that's a big concern for me. Yeah, I wouldn't want to be in that market now. I wouldn't want to be in that market now.
So David, you are an original SPA. So our executive director has this acronym that he calls SPA, which is a self-producing artist. He says because, you know, it's so relaxing. So,
and you're not waiting for the phone
you are
to ring.
original SPA.
Yeah. And you're not waiting for the phone to ring. I remember the job that got me my equity card. I was doing the world premiere of a wonderful play down at Orlando Shakespeare Festival. Hello, Jim Helsing. I hope you're out there. I was playing the role of Friday in Robinson Crusoe in a loincloth. Janelle, you nearly came and saw that show, remember? You were down in Florida. You and I hadn't met. But anyway, I'm not saying that she wanted to come and see me in the loincloth, by the way. I'm just saying that I happened to hear afterwards that she was trying to come and see the show. But anyway, but while I remember I had a moment. I was in Orlando performing in Robinson Crusoe while my play Ecstasy was being performed in London. And so while it was on tour in Great Britain. And so I was getting paid on 2 sides of the Atlantic at the same time. And I would just wake up every morning and I would say, oh man, this is a nice life. This is a really, really wonderful life. Acting in the United States and collecting playwrights royalties from a tour in Great Britain. What? And it's happened to me more than once, you know, and it's a wonderful thing. So long live the spas.
Living the dream.
Absolutely.
Caribbean spa.
There you go.
So David, you've been very wonderfully enlightening in terms of like the wonderful experiences that you've shared. Are there any words of wisdom, advice that you would give to the playwrights and theater artists that we have with us in this community today? What do you wish you'd known when you were starting out?
Well, a couple of things that I wish I'd known when I was starting out. Yes, I wish I had known that patience is a virtue and a little bit won't hurt you. Because producing in Jamaica at the time I was there was relatively easy. If you had a play and you had some money, you could call the Barn Theater or the Little Theater or the Pantry Playhouse, and as long as the theater was available, you could put your show. I wish I'd known that when I came to the United States, that as a playwright, that when you write a piece, you have to be in it for the long haul, because producing on a really nice New York main stage is very, very different from in Jamaica. I mean, agent, I'm coming to New York and people are saying, oh, you're a playwright, who's your agent? And I'm like, what? They said, you're not gonna get anything really produced unless you have a good literary agent, you know? So I wish I had known that what I was in for. But I don't regret, you know, I don't regret that journey at all, you know? But what I would say to people, you know, to playwrights out there who are writing is keep doing it and keep listening to your spirit. And you have to make up your mind the kind of playwright you want to be. Because I have friends who write plays that they know are probably never going to be commercial successes. I will be very open and honest with you. I am not that guy. If it's not going to make money, I'm not writing it. I'm sorry. I don't have the time and the energy and the passion to look. For me, I mean, I'm not a dad yet, but I imagine that for me, the process of creating a play on the page is what I imagine it must be to raise a child. And then finally, when you get that on stage, you're seeing your baby walk. I can't put my years and years of time and blood and sweat and tears into that and play to two people. I will not do it. So I've been criticized for that. And I've become immune to it because people, oh, he's very commercial. Duh, yeah, okay, give me commercial. Thank you. I'm very happy. Yeah. So but I do not knock playwrights who want to be aesthetic and who will quite honestly tell you that if 5 people come and see their show and those 5 people are happy, they're good to go. I say more power to you. I'm not that guy. I'm just not. Yeah. And I'm very proud of it. And then the other thing that I would also say is I've been told a number of times in my career from people, some of whom's motives may not have been the best, but some others who really do wish you well. And they say, you know, if you stuck to only one thing, like if you said, I'm just going to act and not do anything else, or I'm just going to write and not do anything else, or I'm just going to produce and not do anything else. Have you ever thought that instead of trying to do it all, if you had just stuck to one thing, would you have gone further? And I kind of say, you know what? It's my journey. And one of the things that I've learned about multitasking is that for me, it has proven profitable. I'm in Orlando in the loincloth and I'm getting money from London. I'm not giving that. I actually had to do an Instagram post once when somebody else again came to see me in a play. I kid you not. It was a play of mine. It was Love and Marriage, Janel. You know the person. Mm-hmm. They came up to me afterwards. I love the piece. I love it. I love the piece. The piece is you as one of the cast. You should stick to your strength. And I think your strength is right. Yeah. So today I would have responded. Oh, I would have responded. Back then, I was very diplomatic. And I just said, well, you know, thank you so much for coming. Of course, I was cursing a string of Jamaican bad words under my breath, but I smiled. Now I will not do that. If you come to me, if you come now, I'm going to speak my mind. Yeah. And that's another thing I would tell anybody here. Be honest with people. Be honest with people. You don't have to be rude, but be honest. And what I should have said on that occasion, thank you so much for your opinion. And when I want it again, I'll ask, thanks. That's what I should have done. That's what I should have done.
And seen.
And seen. Yeah, that's what I should have done.
I think we can open up the room now to see if there are any questions.
Please ask me some questions. Please.
I have one.
Hi.
Thank you so much for the talk. It's so insightful and very entertaining as well. Yeah, so I do DEI for YPAC, which is a subcommittee of TRU for those of us under 40. So I wonder if you or other people in the room as well have any advice for the kind of programming, the kind of things that TRU YPAC could do for DEI?
Oh, okay. Well, to be very honest with you, I know that Janelle has been involved with TRU for some time. I don't know enough about TRU at the moment. I am considering this a starting point for me to learn more about what the organization does. And so if you ask me that question in a couple months' time, I will have a better answer. But I don't think I would be in a position now to, to give a true opinion or guidance as to what programs I think might be effective. But I do plan to educate myself. So please ask again the next time I'm on, if they'll have me back.
Does anyone else have anything to say?
So I would say, generally speaking, yes. So generally speaking, Cheryl, Scott, and myself, we have these discussions often, and we find sort of the sweet spot of DEI when it comes to creativity is sort of a layering approach. And when you can, and that's why I decided to call today a cultural exchange. So material feels like for programming, material where people feel like they may not know something about a specific culture, but there is some kind of exchange that they can get from the experience. That, I think, is sort of like the sweet spot of knowledge and that exchange. If you have that, I think you can build upon it. So it's always something that I look for in anything that I'm trying to produce. As David was saying, it correlates to sort of wanting to be commercial, but how do you reach people who may not know about this culture, and how do you make it something that is attractive to share in that way?
I'm going to yes and Janelle by saying that it's the universal themes too, because if there's something that people can connect to, like Shakespeare and his universal themes, or if you can say that this play that is about a Black family is essentially, it's about a family and it's about a dad and a mother who do this, and you say, so people can look at it and say, oh, I recognize that. I can understand that. So it's not, then when they come recognizing the universal, you can show them the specifics and say, geez, we are really more universal than I thought before I came in to see this show.
And I'm going to yes and as well. I'm sorry, there's a lot of background noise. But you also have to bear in mind that when, as an artist, when you are telling a story that is very esoteric and is very much about your culture, regardless of what standpoint you're taking, if it is ethnocultural, if it's LGBTQ, whatever, if you are there to say, well, if you're there to essentially preach to the choir and tell a story of your culture for other people who are in your culture to the exclusion of people who are not in that culture, that is up to you if you want to sort of internally celebrate that, but adjust your expectations insofar as your audience response is concerned, and your attendance is concerned. Because as David said, if you want to be a commercial person, if you want to be successful in that way, or if you want to reach just more people, regardless of the money involved, you do have to take those universal themes into consideration, or to make it accessible to people. Or, even if you are sticking to your guns and saying, this is the acts that we use, this is the story we tell, this is our family dynamic, it helps to give the audience something to hold on to. If you're sticking to the dialect, super titles. You can subtitle English over English in different dialects. It's doable. So just know who not only what story you're telling, but who you want to tell it to. And that's, I think, the most important thing for like DEI insofar as artistic expression.
And
May
Fred
I say
has,
something?
of course, of course.
Yeah, no, I wanted to also say that one of the reasons why I think many Jamaican playwrights are of my mindset also is that in Jamaica, and I can't speak for most or all of the other Caribbean countries as well, we don't have the kind of government grants and access to funding from major art and artistic institutions to support theater. So when you see a Jamaican play taking place in Jamaica, it's probably that producer, they've probably taken out a loan or a second mortgage on their apartment, which I've certainly done, to put a show on. And so failure is really not an option. You know, it's not as though you got $500,000 to mount something that, you know, 5 people may come to. And unfortunately, a result of that has been that in the 1960s and the 1970s, Shakespearean plays were done in Jamaica regularly. But once the theater became more commercialized in the 1980s, and you know, you know, because people tried. I remember there was a production of I can't remember which of Shakespeare's plays it was that took place up at the University of the West Indies outside in the Chapel Garden. It couldn't sustain itself for a decent run because so few people came out, you know, because Shakespeare in Jamaica is not very commercial. So imagine my joy coming here and say, oh, you get paid very, very well to go do Shakespeare in front of 4,000 people in St. Louis, Missouri. You know what I'm saying? So, but that's different because those theaters get funding from the state and from the government to do that sort of thing. But you're gonna find that a lot of Caribbean playwrights and a lot of Jamaican playwrights, they've got to make money. They are bringing a show and they want to give the audience, they want to give the audience something that people will be willing to pay for. And I do draw a line because, you know, Janel knows this, that I think it's possible to strike a happy medium between something that is commercially successful, but has what I consider to be artistic integrity. I mean, there are things that people have offered to do with my plays to make them even more commercial. And I've drawn the line and said, I'm not interested in doing that because I might want to make money, but I'm not going to turn one of my plays into something that I did not conceive, or I'm not going to give the rights to somebody who wants to turn it into something else so that they can make money, you know, with my name. So I find that people seem to think that when you say you're in this business as a commercial playwright, there's almost a kind of intellectual snobbery that, you know, people kind of turn their noses up sometimes as if to say, oh, he's in it for the money. That means that his work is probably for the, you know, that the work can't be any good. And, you know, and Steven Spielberg for a long time, I'm not comparing myself to him, but the more money he made is the more some people said, well, he can't be any good. It took Schindler's List for people to say, oh, because Jaws, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, when you're making that much money, there are people who don't, some people don't even go to your movies because they say, if he has that much mass appeal, the films can't be good. He was getting to it with E.T., which is a beautiful movie that made money, but it was Schindler's List when he said, okay, I'm going to get serious with you all. That, and then Saving Private Ryan, that people were, oh, so he is good. Oh, so it can make money and really grab you by the heart. You know what I'm saying? It's that age of Cecil B. DeMille back in the day. People thought the Ten Commandments to me is one of the greatest films of all time. And the critics at the time were, oh, it's DeMille. You know, it's for the masses. It's too commercial. No, I like commercial. I do. So just wanted to say, but I'm saying that I'm coming from a country where every play that I've ever put on, somebody either had to believe in me or I had to believe in myself. Nobody wrote us a check ever. No government institution said, go do this, ever. I hope that changes.
Right.
Unfortunately, it looks like it's in the process of changing in this country to become much harder to get.
It's going back, right? It's going back.
Yeah.
Right. So, David, speaking of commercialism, put the information for McBEE in the chat.
I'm not hearing you very clearly, Janelle. I don't know if it's. Oh, okay.
Yes, I was saying, speaking of commercialism, you should put the information for McBEE in the chat.
Yes.
Yeah. And if I were more technologically au fait, I would do that. I don't know how to do it.
I think Jay already did. I think Jay
so
put
maybe
it in
Jay
there.
can do that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I would say it verbally.
Awesome.
Anybody who wants information about McBEE can go to our Eventbrite page. We still have tickets left. It's McBEE, MCBEE, theplay.eventbrite.com. McBeetheplay.eventbrite.com. Sunday, June the 23rd, one show only, 7 p.m. with the nice part, the free food is at 5:30 p.m., followed by the show at 7 p.m. at the Jamaica Performing Arts Center in Jamaica, Queens.
Wonderful. Before we go up, Fred has had his hand raised up very politely.
Oh, okay.
Fred,
Hey, Fred,
what did you want to ask?
Well, first of all, I just want to say I'm from a Caribbean background, a Latino Caribbean background, from the Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico, and also the French Saint Martin. Okay, so and that's the interesting thing about the Caribbean. We're very diverse in you know, the different islands and countries and things like that. If you talk about mixture and everything there, you know, it started really over there and brought up to here, or people, you know, kind of gotten wind to it. But what's interesting, when I lived in the Virgin Islands, my very first play was in what some people call calypso and all of that, in terms of the accent. And I found out that at that time, this was in the early to mid 70s, so you can see how old I am. The thing is, there was nothing I found on the island except for Jamaica and knowing about Derek Walcott that reflected the culture, because everything was, like you said, David, in Shakespeare. So I decided to write and learn more of the vernacular to present a children's play called Why the Donkey So Stubborn, okay? And what happened was, when I went to the States, I noticed that even songs like reggae was long, you know, it was down there before it got over here. But there wasn't anything to reflect the Caribbean culture in terms of theater, okay? And my question to you and Janelle is, you know, is there any kind of possibility or move to bring more of that to reflect the Caribbean culture, you know, just like you have with you know, the Latino Hispanic groups, or with, you know, the African American groups? Is there anything that can bring or introduce people up here, you know, of more Caribbean stories, more Caribbean, anything, you know, things that really reflect the Caribbeans and reflect, you know, quite a number of islands as well. I do have a friend, he's from Jamaica. I don't know if you ever heard of him. His name is Andrew Clark. He has yeah, you know Andrew? Okay, yeah,
of
he
course.
has Brata Singers. He
Brata
was
Brata Singers, absolutely.
Yeah, no, he was my star and lead actor for a children's play called The Island of Yaki and Bamboo, which was a Caribbean play, and he was my main actor, and we ran that for 3 months in 13th Street, and it was very successful. You know, he, you know, he tries to, I think he's the only one that I know who tries to really promote the whole Caribbean concept, you know, coming from Jamaica, but at the same time, also acknowledging the other islands. So my question is there a way, or how, or is this a movement or anything that's happening to kind of do more of that, do more.
Right. Well, that's a very good question, Fred. I'm so glad Carlene is here because she knows Andrew very, very well also. And Andrew and I have been friends. Andrew and I have been friends for many years. In fact, true story. You remember when I mentioned earlier that when I was in Florida getting my equity card in that show, one of my plays was being performed in the United Kingdom. And I was making money here as an actor, and I was getting playwright royalties from Great Britain. Andrew Clark was in the cast of that play. It was my play Ecstasy, and it was touring the UK, and Andrew was in that cast. So he and I go back a long way. And Andrew has done a tremendous job with the Brata Singers and with his Brata Theatre Workshop in bringing Jamaican plays and Jamaican theater to mainstream audiences in New York. I believe the last major production that they did was my friend Carl O'Brien Williams' excellent play on what I would call the nature of being Black, called The Black That I Am, which they did at Here Art Center last year. But Andrew has also brought Aston Cook's plays to New York, as well as our mutual friend Delia Harris. They did God's Way also. So, we collaborate because when Brata had their magnificent 15th anniversary celebration the other day, we had members of our street team handing out our flyers to our show. So, and then when Andrew made his off-Broadway debut in The Harder They Come last year, all of us went out and supported him. So there is a very definite community friend. And what is going to make a big difference, I will tell you, and bring even more diversity into theater, Fred, I can assure you, is the current wave of cinematic and television shows and films set in Jamaica and the Caribbean. Check it out. In just the last 2 years, we've had the Bob Marley movie. We've had Oprah Winfrey producing the TV series Black Cake, which was partially set in Jamaica. Out of the United Kingdom, Netflix did the TV series Champion. The BBC and HBO are in post-production on a TV series that I've been a part of in a production capacity called Get Millie Black. When people see more of us on screen, they will want to see more of us on stage as well. And I think that my friend Justine Hensel, who produced The Harder They Come off Broadway at the Public Theater last year with Andrew, I think that what's happening in the world of cinema and television is going to help her push her play forward as well. And I think it'll help Malik Yoba and Janel and myself with Against His Will also, because Jamaica and the Caribbean are up there on the big and small screen, all over streaming platforms and in cinemas. And I think this is going to fuel a passion and a desire for all things Caribbean: art, music, dance, and theater. So we're getting there. I'm very, very optimistic now. Thank God the Bob Marley movie
representation, all representation for the effort.
Absolutely.
That's great.
Yeah.
No, I really appreciate it. Thank you, David. And I just want to
you're welcome.
one thing, that if anybody needs a fantastic artist, Andrew is phenomenal. He has a beautiful voice.
Incredible.
And it amazes me that he hasn't been discovered yet, but that's just my bias. Okay.
It's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. It's gonna happen.
Thank you again so much, David, and thank you all for being here. I just wanted to take us out with reminders of what's upcoming. So next Friday's community gathering is Theater in a Box. Yes, you can do it, with TRU board member John Lant is going to be speaking. The Friday after that, Friday, June 21st, will be From Big Broadway to a Small West Coast Nonprofit, with Nancy Richards, an accomplished marketing professional with a distinguished 20-year theater career in New York. Remember our Tony Party fundraiser on Tony Day, June 16th at Jack Doyle's. Your ticket price will include one drink, but you get wine with dinner, dessert, Oh, and we are going to have you get Tony ballots in which you may win tickets to shows. And the last town hall of the month will be, the town hall will be on Thursday, June 27th at Polaris, Barely Visible Native American Theater Artists. Thank you all so much, David. We want to stay in touch with you and work with you at TRU. And thank you all for coming.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Bye. Thanks for having me. Have a great evening.
Thanks, David.
Okay.
Thanks, Jay. Talk to you later.
Will do.
Bye.